Let's look at some of the names that will be in town this week. The big one that everybody's fallen in love with, and for good reason, Ryan Wingo. There's a couple of reasons why Tennessee should like him. We've seen Steve Wiltfong project him to Tennessee. He is a five-star prospect, number 4 prospect nationally. It would be an absolutely huge pickup, and he ranks as the number 3 wide receiver in the class of 2024. 6'2", 198 pounds from St. Louis, Missouri. He is just a fantastic prospect. I've watched his tape, and I tell you what, if Tennessee picks up him, that's a statement get. I don't know his time frame, Jarreau. You might, but let's say he committed on Monday in January. That would be a monster pickup. Not expecting it, but whenever he signs, he's the type of guy. Not as much as a Nico because he's quarterback, and I get that, but um, as far as a guy that steps up and says, I want to be a part of this program, that's the type that typically brings in other commitments in their wake.
Yeah, and I think his timeline is more a summer timeline. So if I remember correctly, he's going to commit. He plans to commit, obviously, July or August before the high school season. But like you said, he's a guy, number 14 prospect nationally, that's been to Tennessee several times. And really, you would almost say if he goes somewhere else, it's a Tennessee miss at this point because he's projected to Tennessee. He's been to campus several times. Heupel's big on him. And you go back to he goes to St. Louis University High School in St. Louis, Missouri. You go back to Heupel going to those Missouri stomping grounds. We saw it with some guys in the 23 class as well, where back when he was the OC at Missouri, he knows these high schools and he can go in and get guys he wants. And Wingo is, for obvious reasons, a guy he wants. 41 catches for 785 yards. He had 19 yards a catch this past season with 13 total touchdowns. So he's a playmaker, like you said, 6'2", 198. And I think at this point, if Tennessee doesn't pick him up, it would be a miss for them more than a pickup for somebody else because he seems to be almost a lock to be in Knoxville.
If you're out there watching on YouTube, please hit the like button. If you haven't subscribed yet, we appreciate that. If you're on one of our audio platforms, be it Apple or Spotify, please turn your notifications on. Just to give you an idea, we've added Cooper Mays, Jacob Warren, John Adams to all of our platforms. So if you don't have the notifications on, you're not going to know that. So we would appreciate you doing that. It'll just pop up and you'll be able to tune in to what we think is pretty darn good coverage of the Vols. So let's continue down the list. I'm going to jump forward just a little bit out of order, but Boo Carter is a guy that I've got a few question marks about, quite frankly. Here's a guy from Chattanooga, from Brainerd High School. Correct me if I'm wrong. He transferred schools midway through the playoffs. He was injured. At this point, he's predicted to end up at Tennessee. He's been a high target. Boo Carter, a similarity to Wingo. If they don't get him, I think it's a significant loss. I think he ends up playing for Tennessee. You?
Yeah, I would say the same thing. And more Boo Carter than Ryan Wingo. If they lose Carter to an out-of-state school, I don't think that's a good look because Josh Heupel has been, like most SEC schools, you have to recruit, and like Josh Heupel said, you have to recruit in your state because there's so much talent in the Southeast. So Heupel's had success in Tennessee in the 23 class, and he had success in Georgia in the 23 class. So if Boo Carter somehow escapes to an out-of-state school or like Colorado, like he's been tweeting a lot about recently since Dion went there, I think that would be a big loss. Not as much from a standpoint as talent, just from a standpoint of trying to keep your in-state kids in state.
I'll go
And
ahead.
he's a
Go
go
ahead.
for it.
Okay, go.
No, I was gonna say he's the number 5 guy in Tennessee, and like you said, he did transfer midway through Chattanooga Christian School's playoffs. So, and a lot of Vol fans have come watch him, and whenever he played for Chattanooga Christian School, they were in Grace Christian Academy's district. So when he came to Knoxville and played Grace, he also took a visit to Tennessee that weekend, and there were a ton of fans at that game, not to watch Grace versus CCS, but to watch Boo Carter and cheer him on. So he's the number 268 prospect nationally, and I think if Tennessee lets him go out of state, that'd be not a very bad look.
You know what it would remind me of, Calhoun, is Von Bell. and Derek Dooley just didn't even drive the 90 minutes to recruit Von Bell, who loved Tennessee. And I remember interviewing him, and he went to Ohio State, and Von Bell was a 4, maybe even a 5-star prospect. And Von Bell, I was like, "Who are the final schools you like?" And I think it was Alabama. He goes, "Alabama, Ohio State, and well, Tennessee." Well, he grew up a Tennessee fan. He didn't go to Tennessee because nobody went down there to recruit him. So that's not the case with Boo Carter, but it would be that kind of loss where you're like, that's a really black mark on your resume. I'm sure you remember that, Calhoun. That was just buffoonery.
Yeah, that was the most frustrating part of the Derek Dooley tenure when it came to his recruiting was he was so, and we've talked about it before, process oriented. Like he had like a checklist, and he wasn't going to recruit an athlete until they passed his evaluation process. And I mean, he would take forever to clear that evaluation process before he went and recruited an athlete or any star player for that matter. And yeah, Von Bell was a highly touted prospect and he was already getting offers from so many other schools when Derek Dooley hadn't finished his checklist yet on him. And
I was never able to confirm this, but I was told by somebody in the recruiting department that Derek Dooley did not go to one high school football game during his tenure at Tennessee.
I had heard that he did not have the best relationship with high school coaches in Tennessee. I do know that.
You've got to show up, get in the car, plane. I mean, it's easy.
The only thing I'm going to say, and this is going to be my hottest take of the day, I'm going to say this right now. I've covered enough recruiting. I remember the Butch Jones first 2 top 5 classes in 2014 and 2015, very Nashville heavy. Guys, middle and Central East Tennessee prospects are usually really overrated if you look at their like that's like where some of the biggest busts come from in all of recruiting.
You have to go to high school football games.
You do.
I mean, like
if you want to take it,
Nick Saban will sit there and watch a 3-star on a Friday night in Homewood when he's got Georgia the next day. I mean, for goodness sake, Derek Dooley was just a complete buffoon when it came to recruiting, in-state or out. Lane Kiffin had a helicopter. Jarreau, you're too young to remember this, but because the traffic in Atlanta, they had a orange helicopter go from school to school so he could hit 6 schools in one Friday night. And Derek Dooley couldn't hop in the car and drive 90 minutes to see Von Bell in Chattanooga. But I don't want to get sidetracked. You were saying?
I was going to say, if you want to go into Calhoun's point about Tennessee guys being overrated, Tennessee's number 1 prospect in the state, Edwin Spillman, is the number 98 prospect nationally.
Well, I want to have this discussion for another day. So I think the Nashville guys do get maybe a little overrated, but I think they're getting there. So let's do that another day. That's a whole different topic. This visit list brought to you in part by Andy Mason Realestate.com. AndyMasonRealestate.com. Man, you're going to love Andy because in their office they have over 40 years of experience. And how about this for a business tenant? They provide the best service and the best prices. Boom, bang, done. That is pretty darn awesome. Andy Mason, realestate.com. He's my realtor. He saved me tens of thousands of dollars over the years. He should be yours too. And no pressure too, because there was one period where I'd sold my house and I needed a house and he was patient with me. I actually had to move back in with my mom because there wasn't a house ready for me to buy that I liked. And we eventually found one. Other realtors would say, just go ahead and buy this one now because you got to have a house because they want to turn the profit. That's not Andy Mason. So check him out, AndyMasonRealestate.com. Our other guys that are visiting this week, Mike Matthews, 5-star prospect in the 2024 class, expected to be in Knoxville. Number 3 prospect nationally, number 1 athlete in his class. He is from Lilburn, Georgia, 6'2", 180-pound athlete. He is a guy that Tennessee's going to have to battle Georgia with. I'm not sure that they're ready to win a lot of those battles, but maybe they do with Matthews. We'll see.
You took the words out of my mouth. I don't know if they can beat – he's a Georgia guy. I don't know if they'll beat Georgia out to get him. But if they do, it would be a really big pickup. He projects more as a safety or a wide receiver in college, and he had over 1,000 receiving yards this past season. And he also plays basketball, and he leads the team in points. And then he also runs 11.57 100 or 100 meter dash. So he's an athlete, and he's the number one athlete in the class of 2023. So he's a guy that I wouldn't bet the house on that he's coming to Tennessee, but the fact that he's coming to Tennessee's first junior day on January 14th is a pretty good sign to where the Vols stand in his eyes.
In recruiting, Tennessee has to be ahead of the game. I think that's the case with edge rusher Danny Okoye. No word if he's related to Christian Okoye. Remember that name, Calhoun?
I actually do not remember that name.
Christian Okoye, the Nigerian nightmare running back for the Chiefs. Oh my gosh, one of the most powerful tailbacks in the history of the NFL. You can watch highlight films of him, and he's kind of like an Earl Campbell type. But anyway, with Danny Okoye,
Dave, I was 4 when he retired.
Too young to shut your mouth. I don't like hearing that I'm old.
Jarreau wasn't born until 10 years later.
Yeah, you're talking about a guy who has to work in podcasts between doctor visits, so I don't want to hear any of that stuff. Okoye doesn't have a ranking yet, but this is a classic example of Tennessee has to be ahead of the curve, and I think they are. He doesn't have a ranking, but he has 20 offers. I could name off 12 guys in the past couple of years that Tennessee got ahead on that ended up with other offers as significant, but Tennessee being ahead of the game had them stick to Knoxville. So he's informed Off the Hook Sports of his high interest in Tennessee football. That was way back in September when the Vols offered. So I think Tennessee has a great chance out of the young man from Tulsa, Oklahoma.
From the way he talks about Tennessee, I think they have a good chance as well. He's homeschooled, so he plays for the Northern Oklahoma Association of Homeschools. And for them this past season, he had 78 tackles with 21 for loss, 10.5 sacks, and 2 forced fumbles. And like I said earlier, the way he talks about Tennessee, when Tennessee offered him, he said they were already in his top schools that he was considering. And he said he always looked at Tennessee, and he was never blind to the history of the program. So, and like you said as well, with him, he's another one where they're getting in early. So I figure he'll be ranked here pretty soon. And I want to say On3 has a ranking for him. Yeah, On3 holds him as a 4-star. Okay. And the number one guy out of Oklahoma. So I feel like 24/7 Sports will have him ranked here pretty soon. And Tennessee was one of his first Power 5 offers, and he holds them in high regard. So like you said, I feel like the Vols have a very good chance if they impress him tomorrow that he could end up in Knoxville.
Well, and he's in the state of Oklahoma. The in-state Sooners seem to be in a bit of flux. So I'm not sure that the whole Brent Venables thing is going to work out there. So don't think for a second you don't target schools in their states, their home states, that aren't having struggles. That's why Tennessee was so good in the 90s by targeting the Carolinas. Offensive tackle Donovan Harbor will be in town. And he is considering Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan, Oregon, Wisconsin, and Florida. That was his top 7, 6'5", 310 pounds. And he's a young man that, and these are the type of young men, he's out of Wisconsin, that Tennessee is going to have to win battles with the big cats. And in particular, defensive tackle, but he's an offensive tackle, an offensive lineman. It's the big guys that can move that are the game changer. And I think that was evident Monday night in the national championship game. Tell me about Harbor.
Yeah, so he's the number 1 prospect out of Wisconsin, number 60 prospect nationally. And he was on campus a couple times in the fall watching some of Tennessee's games. So I think it's a very good sign that for their first junior day, they're bringing him in and rolling out the red carpet. And like you said, like this season, they picked up Andre Carrick and John Campbell out of the transfer portal. But I don't know if you want to necessarily rely on the transfer portal every cycle to fill your offensive line. So I think picking up guys like a Donovan Harbor at 6'5", or Harbor, at 6'5", 310, can help beef up that offensive line room. So maybe here in 2 or 3 years, when you have a couple guys graduate, you don't have to worry about scrambling in the portal to pick up guys when you have Harbor, who's been sitting around 2-3 years getting his body ready, and he's ready to play on the field. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. But I was listening to some podcasts the other day, and they were talking about, like, you look at Georgia, where they have all these 5-star guys, and then you look at a TCU where their team was mainly transfer portal guys. Well, these 5-star blue chip prospects or 4 stars that Georgia have been in the system and been practicing with Kirby Smart instead of trying to piece together a team every January.
Man, if you would have asked me this a year ago, Calhoun, your thoughts too, I would have said you want the 5-star guys that stick with the program. But man, I've seen so many guys have success with transfer guys. I think that thought is a little bit antiquated. Of course, you want the guy who sticks for 4 or 5 years, but man, you get an awful lot. I mean, Hendon Hooker was the transfer. You get an awful lot out of that transfer portal.
Yeah, especially on the offensive line. I think offensive line is where recruiting, when you talk about 5-star, 4-star, you want to talk about where the biggest misses are. They always seem to be on the offensive line. It's funny because we're talking about Donovan Harbor, and he's from Wisconsin. And Wisconsin,
It's pronounced
sorry,
Wisconsin.
my wife is from Wisconsin. She does not say it like that. But if you look, Wisconsin fills the NFL with offensive linemen. None of them are that highly recruited. I think it's such a hard position. Some of Tennessee's biggest bust in history were offensive linemen. Here's a name. Dave will remember this. Brandon Jeffries. Anybody?
I do. Yeah.
The star of the 2002 recruiting class. Never saw the field with Tennessee.
Yeah, I don't know what he's doing now. Harbor will be in town, and then we got to wrap these next two guys up because we got Blake Topmeyer of the USA Today Network. He's the SEC columnist coming up. A guy, when it comes to ranking, there's nothing iffy about him. Iffy Obedigawu will be in town, and tell me about him quickly. Number 15 cornerback in the class of 2024.
Yeah, so he's a DB, and we know good and well that the Vols need defensive backs in their classes, defensive backs in the portals, because they struggle in the secondary. That was evident this past season. So he's a guy, number 158 prospect nationally. He's a guy that could get in the 2024 class that'll help him out. 6'1", 185. He's from Baltimore, Maryland, and he's bringing his teammate, safety Idris Farouk, with him as well. He's the number 19 prospect out of Maryland. So you have two secondary guys who played with each other in high school, both coming to the junior day down from Maryland. And he's a guy that Tennessee has been high on and been trying to get to campus. But whenever they're playing high school football and Tennessee's all over during the season, it's a little rough to get from Maryland to Tennessee very often.
And then his teammate, safety Idris Farouk, will be in town. Not as highly regarded, but maybe you see a package deal. Jarreau, great job. We look forward to your recruiting coverage throughout the weekend, and I will talk to you soon. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank y'all.